conservation team leads to talk about their work over the past year and update us on where they're at. And we'll just run through each of those back to back. And so when you're up, come on up to the stage, give your presentation, and then the next person can come up and take their place. And after that, we'll have some question and answer time where we can ask our panel of species conservation team leads any questions that we have, or we can ask individual questions as well. So we'll start off with Stuart Orr with Circe and Delia. Okay, can you hear me? All right, good. So, Stuart Orr, I work for the Nature Conservancy. Here to give the Circe and Delia working group update. This is sort of an iteration of slides I've presented before, but this project goes back really about 10 years or so, in the very beginning. There we go. All right, so Circe Working Group consists of a group of partners. We have people from Bitches Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy, and the Indiana DNR Division of Nature Preserves. All right, I've gone through this before, but essentially this is sort of the goal of the working group. Essentially, if we can eventually, sometime down the line, have a robust enough population in the state to get it delisted, that would be awesome. So I'm going to do an overview for 2024, which mostly consisted of monitoring, but also some really good land management work at the Weah Creek Cemetery site. All right, so starting down in the Weah Plains at the reintroduction site, this was monitored in May of last year. We found 105 surviving rosettes. That's an 89% survival rate from 2023. 4 of the rosettes flowered. The seed didn't necessarily appear to be viable, but it was allowed to disperse across the site naturally. We did have a pretty severe drought last summer, which kind of impacted a lot of the plants, to be honest. But there at that particular site, they were observed through summer into fall, and most looked pretty good. And then recent update from Bob Easter, they did do a burn on that particular area about a month ago. All right, Weah Plains Cemetery site. Bob Easter with Niches, and I don't see Bob. Are you here today? Okay. So Bob Easter with Niches has been really key in this partnership there. Working with the township trustee on management of the site. So the population at the site has been declining a little bit over the last few years. Some thoughts that Bob had is it could be due to collection of seed for offsite use, but also the site hadn't been mowed in a few years, so potentially a lack of mowing was increasing competition for the thistle at the site. No seed was collected for off-site use last year, although Bob did collect seed, and then they did a carefully timed mowing in August. He then distributed the seed throughout the site afterwards. All right, so going all the way up to the dune swale, we did some monitoring there this year. Monitoring the remnant, we found 8 rosettes, which is an increase of 1 from 2022. And if there's any holes in the data, it's just because that might not have been monitored in a particular year. So bear that in mind going forward. At the augmentation site, we are not seeing great results there. We found 2 rosettes of 1 flowering plant, which is 15% survival from 2022. Down to the Kankakee sand section. At remnant number 1, we found 17 rosettes with no flowering individuals. It's been a few years since that particular population is flowering. This is up a little bit from 2023. At the adjacent augmentation site, this was planted a few years ago. We found 2 rosettes, and this is down from 15 in 2023. At the nearby augmentation site 1B, we had installed 100 plugs in May of 2023. Got hit by a flash drought. We watered the plugs as best we could, but by July of 2023, only 32 were surviving. But last year, we found 16 rosettes and 1 flowering plant, which is a 53% survival rate in 2023, which seems pretty good to me. All right, on to remnant population number 2. A new discrete patch was discovered last year containing 3 rosettes, which is really exciting. The old patch contained 98 rosettes with 2 flowering stems. The adjacent augmentation, which was installed a few years ago now, we were only able to find 1 tagged rosette. And then moving over a little bit farther away to augmentation site 2B, similar to the previous site, 147 plants were installed in May of 2023, watered through the drought. This year, we only found 10 rosettes, which is about a 7% survival rate, but we were only able to locate 38 out of 147 tags. So, not entirely sure. Are there still some there they weren't able to find? Don't know. We'll try again next year. And moving on to the Kankakee Sands reintroduction site. These plants were planted in summer or fall of 2023 in 2 different locations. In location 1, I found 30 rosettes out of 121 planted. This is a 25% survival rate. And then in location 2, we had 14 rosettes out of 39 planted, which is a 36% survival rate. And the final location in the Kankakee Sand section, we were attempting to do kind of a mixed genetics seed production bed. Apparently, Sergeant Noya didn't particularly like the area we chose for that. We only found 2 rosettes this last spring. Those plants will be monitored, but this project is going to be discontinued, at least at this location. And then finally, for the Grand Prairie site, we monitored the augmentation site 1. 49 plants were installed in May of 2023, and this year we found 18 rosettes out of those 49 for a 37% survival rate. And then going forward, we're going to keep up with the monitoring. As Don mentioned earlier, monitoring is very important, and the team is committed to doing it into the foreseeable future. And then, should the opportunity exist, we're going to keep working with profit pools as they become available, whether it's next year or 5 years from now, and keep working through the project plan. So I got.
I'm Nick Member of ENT. I'm the lead for Tail Bessia Buellii. I'm the lead just because I happen to manage one of the only sites that has the plant in it. I'm not a botanist. Anyway, this past year, the main thrust of the work has been on just keeping the gas on habitat work. I had some capacity issues after 2020, the pandemic. And so getting good habitat work back on LaGrange County site was imperative. Danielle's team over at Wade Creek had done a ton of good work over there on habitat work over there. So hopefully we'll see some good results in plant numbers this year and in the following years. In 2024, we surveyed May 15th, 257 plants and 37 flowering. That's slightly down from 2023. And it's sort of in a trajectory that follows sort of a dip in capacity at the site and thus a dip in management pressure. This plant, I think, responds very quickly to changes in management, to changes in habitat conditions. We continue to open up the understory and do some work in there, and we intend fire there every year we try. It's a tricky site to burn. It's right next to the turnpike. We need a north wind, and so does rain. So we don't get to burn that site as often as we'd like, but fire is definitely a crucial component of managing for this species. We also had some progeny from local LaGrange seed that was returned to us. And so we put those in plots next to adjacent to occupied areas on site, I mean like 10 feet away. I guess we went off script with the reintroduction plan, but I think this was before the reintroduction plan was released. So, you know, we put these guys back in the ground. Each 64 we'll put in there, and we're going to monitor these guys in the coming years to see if they can keep up with their neighbors and their brothers and sisters that were already there to begin with. Oh, here we go. Some trends that we've seen over the years. So here we go back to 2013. this particular site in 2011, when we started really paying attention to details, we found, Catherine G and myself found, I think, fewer than 30 plants at this site. And so in 2012, 2013, we started doing a lot of habitat work and understory management work, and we saw a real explosion in plant numbers over that time. If we look at the total population numbers beginning in 2013, we had roughly 30 individuals in 2011. We found in 2013, we found about 130. None of them were flowering. 2014, we just see this trend continue to go as this plant responded really well to management work early on, which is primarily going to be mid-story and understory clearing and getting more sun. Not so much, a little bit of overstory clearing, but it's mostly opening up that mid and understory level. Right around after the pandemic, 2021, no survey in 2020 because I wasn't allowed to go outside. And 2021, we saw a dip in capacity and a dip in management, and some numbers started to go down a little bit. And one of the things I've noticed with this plant is it's not just shrubs and understory shade seeds are really impacted, it's leaf litter. And if you're not keeping consistent fire, consistent management on small diameter woody stems in these sites, leaf litter accumulates and seems to smother these plants. They're very sensitive to a lot of different things. It's close to actual gardening of flower beds I think I've ever done. And we see the same with the plants then. We see a dip as they explode early. And then just after the pandemic, and during the pandemic, we started to see plants moving out, mainly as leaf litter and small diameter woody stuff encroaches on the site. At the different new sites, we collected some seed. 25 kitten tails were found in June, June 28th. That should be 2024, not 2023. Seed was collected, and that seed is just going to be tested to see what comes out of it. Anecdotally, I had heard that the Weir Creek seed doesn't really do much and doesn't produce much. And so we decided to give it a go. Elisa is growing those seeds out. Any progeny then will just be plugged back in. The Weir Creek can be monitored. And then, like I said, Daniel Howard has done a lot of good work on this site in improving habitat conditions. This guy's just clinging on by a thread there. All done.
I'm going to ask you to speak into the microphone or use the handheld, and hopefully we don't get feedback, but the Zoom people won't hear.
Hi, I'm Crystal DeBoer. I'm the team lead for Barrier to Virginica, which is Virginia bunch flower. Next slide, I guess. Oh, sorry about that. I'll remember eventually. Hey, all right. So bunch flower, historically, the USDA shows that the regionality, mostly northern Indiana species, and it kind of has these two concentrations. So we have a generally kind of east population and the west population sites that we monitor. Just because I thought it was fun. The herbarium sample is from Charles Dean from his garden at Bluffton. Like we don't have a natural site in Bluffton, so you know, maybe there's one there waiting to be discovered that grew out of his garden, but we haven't found it yet. So Charles Dean actually would grow this in his garden and likes the plant not to grow it. But that doesn't count in the records because it was a garden planting. So we have, because of the east and the west population, the eastern population has the fewest number of sites. And within those populations is the fewest number of living individuals. We're still going to monitor, we're not dropping any of the populations, but they just don't seem to have a strong viability. And then just looking at some of the historicals and where we do know them, it seems like there should be some potential for maybe in the county, and there's some natural areas there that are protected that, if I can find enough time and volunteers, we may try to expand the search for that in case anyone's interested. The western population, we have four known sites, and then one that was a newly planted site about 2 years ago. And it's planted on a DNR property, so it's protected. One site is an ongoing frustration of it's not protected, and it has lots of disturbance, and it's multiple right of ways. And so trying to figure out who can do what or not do what is an ongoing challenge that we're working through. Emily has spent a lot of work trying to get somewhere on that, but it's a lot of hoops to jump through. So that one's still there, even though it's getting battered. Not all of those sites were counted this year, but the ones that were counted, those have anywhere from 6 to 50 blooming individuals. So in general, they are relatively steady, but there are certainly different levels of flowering production, seed production that we're seeing. We have plugs that, again, Alyssa is kind enough to grow, and extra round of applause for her because it's the second year that they've been in the greenhouse, because these things grow very, very slow. Part of what we're trying to figure out is why they're growing slow in the greenhouse, and we're seeing some kind of slow growth at some of the newly planted site that's only about 2 years old. So we don't know if it's just slow to establish. It's a soil thing, it's not natural microbiomes, and so it's taking longer. We're not sure exactly. So kind of trying to see if we can get a little more pieces of the puzzle for that this year. And if we continue to have another really good blooming population, then we will look at collecting some seed there to try to augment some of these other smaller populations and try and help some of that genetic diversity, just provide a stable base for these guys. So I think I kind of already talked about this. So we're still be monitoring, like I said, there's eastern and western populations. Most of them are on protected properties already, which is good. Depending on how seed production goes and then the plug viability, we're looking at seed collection and then potentially planting, and actually Andrew is kind enough to we'll be planting the plugs anywhere that's in the nursery with Alyssa, assuming they are happy enough to get transplanted. We'll hopefully have a spring planting at one of the existing sites. And I think all of that I have already said. So I will end early.
Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jason Larson. I work with the Indiana Division of Nature Preserves past 18 or so years. I work in Southeast Indiana, and my fun fact of the day is my office is located in Henryville at Clark State Forest, which is where the plant specimens for Pennsylvania were collected. So that's pretty cool. Right now, the Gene Specimen Working Group is a partnership between Nature Conservancy and Indiana DNR Nature Preserves. Mike Everidge represents State TNC, and myself and Peyton Phelps represent the DNR. So we're small but mighty. Trying to put some new pictures in there for you guys this year so you don't have to look at the same three over and over again. But you can see that Penstemoniae is Indiana's smallest flower penstemon. You can see it compared to my thumbnail there. It's a pretty little flower. It can range from white with these purple pollen guides to full on kind of purple wash. And yeah, I just wanted to get you guys some good close-up pictures of that. So of our 10 Indiana penstemon species, this one is notable in its size. So this next slide is just a comparison between digitalis is the bigger flowered one, and then Demii is going to be the smaller flowered. And you can just get some idea that it is a fairly noticeable size difference. Along here, we've got some maturing seed capsules from Penstemon Demii, and then on the right, you guys should feel pretty special today, because I believe this is the first photograph of Penstemon Demii seeds that's ever been seen by the public. So I'll be signing you autographs later for this. Like the seeds have this really cool reticulation on them. It's like a net was laid over them. Really interesting, like protein coat that's on them, and I guess all the Penstemon seeds kind of share that trait. Yeah, a heavy kind of odd-shaped seed, so dispersal is thought to be just mostly gravity. So just a real quick background, if you're not familiar with the plant. It's an Indiana endemic, and it's kind of basically on the south part of the Knottstone Escarpment, so not up in the Brown County area, but kind of down by the Ohio River. Kind of the Scott, Washington, Clark County type area. And the basic story was that Charles Dean was out, probably hanging out, being a forester at Clark State Forest, and collected this penstemon from basically a roadside, and ran it through the keys and was like, hey, this thing is kind of weird. And sent it off to this guy, Francis Pennell, or Frank as I call him. And Pennell was like, man, this is a new plant. So he eventually described it as Penstemon Demii, named after Charles Dean. And yeah, that's that story. I didn't know much about Francis Pennell, so I looked him up, and I thought you guys would get a kick out of this. This is from his Wikipedia page. Considered delicate by his family, he was excused from farm chores, which engendered him to a lifelong fear of water and incapacity with mechanical devices. Botanists are weird people. I guess we knew that already. So we have about 14 occurrences in the state, and the populations are all relatively large, for the most part, between 25 or 50, and sometimes up to 100 plants. And their range is basically thought to be due to lack of disturbance and lack of suitable natural habitat. Recent work, been monitoring populations with the Scott and the Heritage Program. We're still looking for this plant in natural areas where it should be occurring and where it's occurred in the past. Have not been able to locate it in the wild outside of roadside, really. And we collected quite a bit of seed from wild populations this year that the Indianapolis Zoo is going to be helping us grow up into new plants. So hopefully reintroduce into some of the sites where we've already done some habitat restoration work. So they should be, the habitat's ready to go. We're just going to be waiting on the plants. We also did collect samples from some museum specimens and collected fresh tissue for DNA work, and I already spoke about the zoo. Just some cute insect bugs for you. We kind of tried to inspect some pollinators on Penstemon this year. I think we're going to have to collect some insects to get good IDs, photographs, and really do it for scientific comparison. But you can see the Penstemon pollinators are little for Demii, and for digitalis they are big. So if you want the Grover comparison, small and big, we've got that going for the pollinators here. And so this year, it's probably going to happen 2 years down the line that we're able to actually reintroduce Penstemon to the sites following the guidelines, of course. And then the big news for the year is that our current partner for the genetics work is no longer able to help us out. So we are hopefully just found a new partner to work on the genetics at IU Southeast. That is Dr. Wallen there. She's a cancer geneticist, but she also is interested in all sorts of tool biology and botany. And she is totally on board with this as a project for students and thought it sounded really cool. So I think we're going to be jumping down that rabbit hole in the next couple of months and getting that work started. But I said that before, so we'll see. That's all I have.
Hello, I'm Michael Everidge, and the Nature Conservancy. My plant is Echinidum uncinnatum, also known as blue moxhood. On our team, we have Ellen Hart, Megan Crecilius, Bill Daniels, Jason Isbell, and myself. So here's just an up close and personal, really pretty picture. That's the only reason it's in here. This is put in here to elicit emotional response. So I need to hear some oohing. Ooh, thank you, thank you. Mission accomplished. And yes, one more for color. Thank you. So there are two populations in Indiana. Oh. So the northern population is in Washington County. In the late 1990s, this was discovered at this population, and I wasn't present, so I'm taking the word of someone that was. I believe there were 17 stems at this population in the 90s. In 2020, the population flowered in large volume after an overstory opening. So an overstory maple fell, and the population has actually grown in number to several hundred stems. However, saying that, it's in about 1,000 square feet. So it is a cover crop and a really small population. And when this tree came down, no one that I had known of in about 10 or 12 years had seen this plant flower. And there's this flood of light. And the next year, there were literally hundreds of flowers. So we gathered some seed and planted at K-Sands. There were about 1,000 seeds gathered. And then in 22, we put several plugs in the spring and fall to see if there would be a difference in the planting time or survival rate. There was none. They all survived. It was a dozen at each planting. We planted these in a location that Jason had actually seen a straggler from the main population a few years earlier. So they're actually within about 25 feet of this bigger population. The original population stem count was, or I'm sorry, in 20 and 24, the population is very similar. The population isn't changing, and the volume of light is decreasing every year. So we're seeing fewer flowers, but it's still flowering. But each year it is 10 to 15% less in the flowering. So at this point, the only management on this site is fire, but that doesn't mean that at some point we won't girdle a tree or two. But as of right now, there's no plan for that. In 25, we plan to just do some monitoring on site. The southern population is in Perry County. So in 89 to 2003, the population's documented, and it was 4 to 8 different populations. All are in similar area. They are along Poison Creek. So if you know anything about monkshood, so that doesn't seem odd. I don't know which came first. 20 and 21, attempts at relocating previous populations was mostly unsuccessful. So Cheryl Kuhn and I from Hoosier National Forest went back to some previously known areas. We just couldn't find them. There was a lot of invasives. In 22, we found numerous plants in several locations, all existing near the known population site. And in 23, the largest population stem count was dramatically down. Some invasive removal was done in the immediate area. And in 25 was, again, monitored as well. So future concerns are, of course, climate change. I think this plant likes cool, so guess what? It's probably a problem. Loss of habitat, lack of fire, invasive species, maybe lack of pollinators, and there are, of course, others. So I won't get into that. That's a photograph I took. So that's it. That's all I.
Hello, I am Wyatt. I work for nature preserves, and unlike Mike, I actually do work. So this is where stripe gentian occurs. Ignore that. That's probably Charles Dean's garden. But we have always had it in Harrison County. That's where we've known it from, and it's always been rare. Last year, I showed this INAT map, and I was like, oh no, guys, it looks so bad compared to, these historic collections. But we popped our observation on, and some other ones from Kentucky popped up. So it does look a little bit better than it did last year. So that's exciting. It was a good year for gentians, though, across the board. So I'm going to give you a little recap. These are the two approximate locations of where Stella Dean found them. We have looked and we have not found them. This is zooming into Harrison Crawford State Forest. This is the glade population. We last saw it in 2014. We have looked every year. We can't find it. The glade persists, but there is a bunch of stilt grass on the margin. So this year, what our plan is to go out in July, and we're going to have volunteers. So please email me. And we're going to be pulling the stilt grass in hopes of improving that habitat, but also in hopes of having a bunch of people on their hands and knees really scouring the area and maybe relocating them. Maybe not. That's the Cold Friday population. We found 19 in this last year. We monitored it. That was up from 9, like I said. It was a good year, but we also had Bill Thomas with us, who found the population originally. And so he was able to walk us right to where he'd always seen it. So that made for a really fun day. And then this is our Indian Creek population. This is the one that I'm going to talk about because this is where we've done some management beyond just monitoring. So the short is that it's up 33 from 20 the year previous. So what we did is back in 2023, we counted every single stem. We put pin flags. We took all these measurements. There's Joanna doing some real science, looking at canopy cover. But what we were hoping to do basically was just quantify the difference between this plant and that plant, right? We looked at the height of the plant, the number of the leaves, the whether or not it flowered, if there was insect damage, if it was browse, what the substrate was, and canopy cover. We went back that winter and we did some minor thinning. You can see that there was a forester with us because they cut the grapevine. But we girdled some of the bigger trees and we felled some of the smaller trees. The idea was just that we wanted to sort of conservatively open that canopy up. And this is the same point from in 2 different years. So it was a really light approach. No pun intended, but we did see some response. This is a little glamour shot between one that had been browsed, and then the next year it's blooming with multiple stems and multiple flowers. So we felt really good about ourselves. Here is where I played around with some of the numbers, and the percent of stems flowering was the big and exciting thing, right? So this is the control. This is where part of the population did not have any canopy thinning, and then this is the treatment where where canopy thinning occurred. So in 2023, we had about 6%, and then we had about 10% the next year. The treatment, we went from 0% to over 30%. Oh yeah, and we saw some recruitment. In the control area, we had 5 new plants that we hadn't seen before, and then in the treatment, we had 9. This is something that is worth noting. Both the control and the treatment got bigger and they got leafier, about the same. This is probably not because of the management. This is probably because but O'Bannon Woods had their first deer hunt in 23 and then again in 24. So we saw a tremendous drop in deer browse. So when I was messing around with these numbers, I was like, oh no, did it not matter what we did? Like, what if they just quit being eaten and that's why they're all blooming? Happily, I guess happily. If you just look at the unbrowsed flowering stems, the difference is actually more dramatic. There's actually a slight decline in the unbrowsed stems in the control. So I think between the deer reduction with Harrison Crawford being hunted and with O'Bannon Woods doing the hunt, mixed with our management, we're seeing some good results. So yeah, that's what I got. This is our team. And a bunch over here. So hands up, platform, please.
Well, it's me again. We're not being puked on this time when we went out, so it was a better day. Eric's Verde Distillata, Green Star Sedge. Last year when I was here, our team is up here, guys. We have quite a big team. We haven't all really gotten together yet because we haven't had luck finding it, right? The historical populations, here we've got Wabash and Henry County. We've been concentrating our efforts here. All up and down the Big Blue, just south of the IMI historical population site. We just weren't finding anything. We, spent our times out in glades in fens and found nothing. And that's what I reported last year. Kind of a bummer. And then in 2024, we had a little luck in an unexpected spot in Steuben County at Marsh Lake Preserve. And Scott got a call from Nate, I believe, is that correct? Simon? He was with you when they found them. And Scott got excited, and then I got a text. And that was really exciting, with some pictures after he had done some work. So here it is, and here's the big lake. And if you kind of notice, there's some management going on here. So we have lots of questions, but overall, we did find and was confirmed by several botanists. Scott did his homework, and we found over 130 stems and over 5,000 fruit. We did not find this in the spring. We found it in the fall, in September. And we've learned that since then, that it does not grow with Carex flava, which is what we were seeing in our other sites. There's lots of Carex and Carex flava all over the place, but not green star sedge. In addition, Tony Rezenchek noted that Varicillata perigium beaks have very sparse scattered teeth, while flava and then Cryptolepa is another one that was confused with green star sedge, are either regularly toothed for flava or never toothed for Cryptolepa. I want to tell you this. I pored over the specimen with lots of magnification, and the teeth are definitely very challenging to see and find. So the team will visit this site in 2025. We're going to meet to discuss next steps, do some monitoring, of course, record the physical site information. Scott has done some of that already, so we will just add to that and chat and talk. What are we doing? What's next? In the meantime, we're going to continue some Henry County surveys. Jeff Ray has already, amassed a number of sites that we're going to try to visit and continue in that area, as well as he's going to see if he can get into the historical site there at IMI in Henry County. And then we're going to also try to schedule some site visits in states around us. What is this thing doing? Why is it in Steuben County, none of the historic sites? What's going on? Because the other thing, oh, there it is right up there. I forgot the clicker. Oh, there it is. Historical sites up here. But then notice these are the sites in Michigan. Here's some Ohio sites. So what's going on? Just to give you some photographs, here we are. This is Scott and Nate out here in this, looking for this, and this, and that. A little challenging. Scott kind of knew what he was looking for. It's a beautiful little plant. What stood out for us? This is really real scientific right now, but this is what happened. We have narrow light green leaves, small spherical head, September site visit, not a spring site visit, not a summer site visit. And the overall color of this is not quite as yellow as Flava. So that's what we got. We got a really nice population confirmed. Isn't that exciting? This is cool here in Indiana. So we have a lot of work to do. We're just getting started, and that's our update.
Hello, I'm Doug Vodka, Stewardship Ecologist with the Shirley Islands Land Trust, and I'm presenting on behalf of Team 1, which is Polyphemus natalii. The much talked about today, Polyphemus natalii, prairie parsley. Our team consists of Steve Barker, NiceHorse, Matt Beatty, Indiana DNR Division of Nature Preserves ecologist, Doug Vodka, that's me, Derek Nimitz with DNR Division of Nature Preserves, Noel Pavlovic with USGS, and Nathaniel Pillow with Midwest Biological Survey. Stephanie Prishy has also been super helpful in providing us expert advice. We were unsuccessful in 23, and our region, or our known locations were both the preserve location, which is the Hoosier Prairie Nature Preserve, and then also remnant railroad prairies in southern LaPorte, Stark, and Jasper counties. And so that was going to be the focus of our work this year. Our first foray at Hoosier revealed nothing. We checked all 3 of the population sites and we had no results. So things were not looking good. So then we decided to go and focus on these rail corridors to see if we could indeed find some remnant populations there. I decided to go with the theme today, and that is before and after. This is a Charles Dean location from, I believe, 1930s. And the railroad prairie remnant there had Polyphemus. Modern day is a Conrail yard that has drastically changed that habitat. Likewise, we had those polygons are actually areas that we thought could potentially hold some native plants along the yellow rail corridor. And then, unfortunately, this is in 1 year's time. So we had plotted on going to this area, and the whole area was taken over by solar panels. So it was a stark reality that we were dealing with. Actually, it was a Jasper reality because this is in Jasper County. But those edge habitats were starting to disappear very quickly along this corridor. So it was with great anticipation that I got a text from Matt Beatty. And Matt Beatty doesn't normally text me much, and so I immediately went to look at it and found this. He had found a single plant. He just happened to be walking by it. He was assessing a hazard tree. And amazing eye by Matt. When we went to investigate, we did not find any others. So our monitoring did not yield any more plants. You can see just how tiny it is right there. As it turned out, thanks to Indiana DNR, they had actually required, there had been work there, they used matting to protect that area from soil disturbance. It disturbed the community, but the plant was able to grow after this. So this is the unfortunate part. It is before and after. And so Matt, 3 weeks later, sent me that photograph. So unfortunately, we had thought about protecting. We weren't sure. It was actually about 20 feet away from a road. We didn't want to bring anyone's attention to it. So we had been going off of the belief that the seeds are distributed to some extent by the wind. Minnesota, however, indicates that they are probably animal dispersed. So that was the unfortunate thing for us. We decided, though, to go and look at these rail corridors again. And Matt got permission for us to go along the rail corridor there near Stottsburg, where we found that was supposed to click. Sorry, that was several different. We found an element occurrence of Synthiotria cericium, the silky aster out there. So we were able to monitor that, as well as many other prairie plants, but no polychaete. We also wanted to try and check out 2 others, which was over here in southern LaPorte and up there near Wanata, which was near the historical location. And we were able to find other prairie remnants along those rail corridors. And so we felt that at least we're finding things, but as of yet, we have not found another polychaete. So we are going to continue to monitor the remnant habitats, especially at Hoosier Prairie. We're going to search for those other possible remnant habitats in Stark, Jasper, Lake, and LaPorte counties. And we are talking about whether or not we want to think about a reintroduction program. Do we have time for one more before and after? Okay. So it was a tough year for us. You can see this was Nathaniel before. And obviously, it was a roller coaster ride for us. And so this is Nathaniel after. So it was a bad year. So.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, good. Okay. Let's get on. All right, so now for the cutest plant in the entire show. My name is Andy Schnabel. I'm from Indiana University in South Bend. I'm speaking in place of Gus Nyberg, who was actually the lead for this group. He couldn't be here today. And he decided that this was the cutest plant in this group of plants. This is Pemaranthus frugospermus. We talked about this last year as a slightly longer talk. Some work that my colleague, Dr. Deb Moore, and I did. So last year, or 2023, there were a number of activities. Alita Nyberg had grown out a lot of plants. And so they planted out Pemaranthus in a number of places, in Kankakee Sands and other places. Deb Moore and I did some work on just doing some monitoring of those sites. We also did some pollination work in that year, and we did some experiments on pollination ecology that we talked about last year. And basically the upshot there was that in sites that were large enough, we were getting pretty good visitation, and the plant seems to self-pollinate quite readily, outcross self, and produce a seed pretty much equally either way. In this year, mostly sort of a monitoring year of seeing how well the plants that were put out in 2022 and 2023 were surviving, comparing those to some of the older sites and some of the remnant, what we might call historical sites. Deb and I did one more experiment on seed germination in this year. And in those results, basically we found that there was no difference in seed germination between self and outcrossed seed, as well as in the growth of those. And then we took some of the results and we presented those at the annual meeting of the Botanical Society of America, just to sort of disseminate some of the results a little bit further. So the rest of the summer is just monitoring. And this is one of those plants where you do spend most of your time looking down, trying to find the thing. Even though they're in quite open habitats with lots of sand and open space, they're hard to find. So you're mostly just looking down like that all the time. So I'll show you some of the results. I've got 2 tables here. So there's a couple of remnant populations. There's one up near the lake that Noel showed us in 2023, where we only found 2 plants. But Deb and I went back there and we found 7 this year, so it's in 2024. So it's a little bit better. There's also a second site in Jasper County where we had found 3 plants last year. We couldn't find any of those this year. So in terms of historical sites, there seems to be still almost nothing out there. Some of the older sites that were planted, like in Jasper County, in Newton County, some of those are doing quite well. I'll point out especially the one we call Newton Site B, planted in 2016. We found 41 plants there last year, but in 2024 we went out there and there were seedlings everywhere. We counted up to 155 before we sort of stopped and realized that we were trampling over so much, we just had to get off the site because they're so small and we didn't want to really crush them all. Our sort of control site over in Illinois, we go over to Kankakee County in Illinois and look at this Pembroke savanna. And we found 67 there in 2023, and we got a few more again this year. A little bit more expanded area we found. So that's a pretty good site just over the border in Illinois. The bad news is on this slide. The sites that were planted in 2022 and 2023, there's almost nothing left of those. So Gus put out a lot more sites than Deb and I went to visit. He visited a bunch of those sites. So these are combined data from what Deb and I went to see and what Gus and his colleagues went to see. And the only one that really has any plants remaining is one at Willow Slough and planted in the fall of 2023, has a few plants left. Pretty much everything else is either 1 or 0. So that was a rough year, 2023, for planting things out. There's not much survival to 2024. There are a few more sites that Gus put out in 2024. I don't know exactly how many, and we'll see in 2025 how those did. So sort of the good news, bad news on this species. The older reintroductions seem to be doing okay. They're hanging on, if not maybe slightly growing. The plants can easily produce seed by selfing, so we don't necessarily need a large population to get good seed production. In fact, the species may be largely selfing for all we know. We haven't done an actual kind of mating system study with the genetic analysis. We don't know, in a natural population, what the level of selfing versus outcrossing is. We just know that they're capable of selfing quite readily. The transplanting in 2023 was very hard on the plants. We have very little survival. A few of them are still there. And we're hoping that maybe some will bounce back in 2025 when we go out and look at those, maybe not. But that's kind of where it is right now on that species.
So my name is Kelly Wheat, and I am here representing the Viola Baxteri team, the Baxter's Violet. We're just a new team we just formed last year. So a little background about this tiny little plant. Jay County was the original population in Indiana, and then another population was accidentally discovered in 2020 in Allen County at a development lot, a housing development lot, and then since then more occurrences have been discovered in Allen County. It prefers sandy or rocky loam of limestone prairies and prairie-like openings, and it's often surrounded by richer mesic or swamp forests, which is definitely where we've found it. So what are our plans for this the team? So we're going to manage some of these Allen County sites. The main one is located in Payton County Park. So it's convenient because it is a county park, so it's public land. So, and we've gotten permission to do any management we need to. We're going to conduct yearly monitoring surveys of the Allen County and Jay County sites. And before we do any management of our Allen County site, we plan thoroughly recording ecological and mechanical data prior and during management. This is just because we want to document any effects that our management has on not only the violet population, but also the overall habitat. And then also we're going to keep looking for additional and potential sites for the violet. So an interesting thing about violets in general is that they hybridize, and it kind of makes it complicated to identify. And especially because this violet has very interesting leaf morphology, but there's a wide variation when it hybridizes, and it also hybridizes with Pomata and Sororia, and some of the sites have both Pomata and Sororia, and one of the sites only has Sororia. And disturbance increases this hybridization, and we're not like, is it bad or is it just its natural adaptation to, these disturbances so it can survive? And that's also why we're kind of going really slow with our management, is we don't want to introduce more disturbance than is necessary. So where we are right now is we've done surveys of the Allen County violets last year, and in the fall we collected all of our data at that Peyton County Park site, and in that winter we did a lot of invasive removal at Peyton County Park. And then in 2024, the Friends of Liver Lost acquired a property down in Jay County. They discovered another property that had more Baxter's violets, and they were able to acquire it. I think it was being auctioned, and the presence of the Baxter's violet was a main factor in being able to acquire the property. And so this next year, we're going to continue our invasive plant management. There's quite a lot of invasive pressure at the park. We're going to keep collecting our data, and then we're going to visit all of the Indiana sites for monitoring. And then we're also working with establishing communication with some private landowners in the areas of these violets to get permission to survey for more violets. And then this is our team, and then special thanks to Dr. Marshall for letting us borrow some equipment. And then my cat works the hardest, because their team mascot, his name's Baxter, after the violet. So.
All right, thanks to all of our species team leads. We give them 5 minutes to provide their updates from the past year. They clearly put a lot more time into the work that they've done over the past year for their target species than the 5 minutes that you got to hear. So thanks to all of the team leads for the work they've done. And we have about 10 minutes for question and answer, either to be specific questions about some of the work that these teams are doing, or it could be a broader question for our panel of team leads. So we'll open up the questions, and you want to run that around? The microphone will come around for your questions.
So this is kind of a general question that anybody can answer, but one of the first people that can maybe think of it was Andy. In terms of being on these sometimes really sensitive sites, and then also in terms of like you're going out to the same place multiple times a year, what are some things that you guys do to kind of minimize your disturbance to the site and maybe avoid, trampling plants that you're not aware of, or compromising those sensitive areas?
So in 2023, there were a couple of sites that we visited more than once because we were collecting the pollination data. And these are very sandy soil sites, so they're pretty sensitive to trumping. The other sites were only there once a year, but I agree with you. I think if you think ahead to this monitoring program that we're beginning over the next 3 years, just trying to train people about the difficulty of not stepping on the plants and disturbing the areas, I think might be a part of the training that will be important. There is some literature on this of people who have plots that they work on, and just walking to and from their study plants multiple times can affect the outcomes of their experiments. Plants are sensitive enough to that. So I think that's a very good question. It's a very bad answer for it, but it's a very good question because I think it's difficult, especially when the soils are very sensitive.
I can add a little bit to that as well. When I was doing consulting many years ago, we were hired by Forest Preserve District of Will County to monitor a federally listed species. And we were required to have cots that we would lay on as we did our monitoring. It was some of the most uncomfortable monitoring I've ever done, but it definitely, you could tell a difference that we had not trampled everywhere around those plots that we were monitoring because of the cots. So that's something to consider as well.
I was gonna add, going with clean boots, obviously, stuff like that, EMPs for not dragging anything in there. Yeah, my site, every single plant has a little pin flag. Nobody's gonna mess with it, so it just looks, it's hard to miss the plants. But, yeah, and we really only, back once a year, we go in and monitor. That's the only time that we're really in there in force. And then the rest is just myself and maybe my assistant. But we always try to make sure everything's clean before we go in.
I had a question for Jason on the Piscimendini. It's a kind of a roadside plant for a reintroduction, thinking about like prehistoric conditions. Are you thinking about something like a Buffalo Trace or like Ballsy, Ohio, or more like a glade situation?
Right now, we're thinking kind of a open oak woods type area. So it occurs at Outbrook Ravine Nature Preserve at Clark State Forest, right on the edge of the highway on the boundary of the nature preserve. And so we've done quite a bit of contract work in there to open up the understory. And we're thinking with the extra light that's in there now that we'll be able to hopefully get conditions should be right for them to thrive there if we're lucky. Possibly try other sites too if that doesn't work, but that's kind of our first effort.
Hi, I have a question for Dawn. So given how difficult it can be to identify the Carex Beretta stellata, how do you know that those historic sites in Wabash and Henry County actually contain that species and that it's not a case of mistaken identity?
Sorry, my voice is a little. So we actually had Rock actually went back and looked at those species as well as several other botanists to confirm, and some of them were misidentified from the beginning. So they have been reviewed to make sure that that's what they were. We got another botanist in there who also helped with that. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I haven't done the thing, but we follow.
Hold on, Stephanie.
I was going to ask that similar question. And so can you just maybe finish what you were saying, Dawn? The two counties where there are historic records, although some of the vouchers were misidentified, there are also verticillata.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
I have a general question for the panel. I wonder what skills would be needed to serve on one of the species conservation teams or to lead a species conservation team, or if there's anything specific that any of our teams are looking for in terms of a skill that is not currently on your team. So I can go. So as far as being on a team, I think the biggest couple of things would be, an interest in the plant, maybe the plant itself, the rare species, or also maybe in general rare plant conservation. Is a rare plant done? Kind of mentioned this. Is it a rare plant near you, and you're just into rare plant conservation, or is it a species you're particularly passionate about? One of those two. And also, having some ability to do field work. It's not necessarily a long slog through a swamp necessarily to get to where some of these plants are. Some of them you can almost drive up to, but being at least a little bit familiar with field work and a little bit comfortable with being in the field is good just for being on the team. And from my perspective as a team lead, being willing to really be the lead, having a good organizational ability, which I struggle with sometimes. Being willing to lead, being able to, pull people together for meetings, organize field work. All of us are doing this as a plus to whatever our jobs are for the most part. So everybody's really busy. But being able to get, those passionate, interested people organize and actually get out there to do work, whatever the work happens to be that particular year. The ability to do that is really important.
To that, as someone who, again, this is like a side job, I could use help organizing and calling meetings and things like that. So somebody who's, maybe has a little bit of time to do that could also be quite beneficial to our teams. But I barely have time to, I mean, that's the truth. So I don't want anything to fall from the cracks. So even have somebody who's willing to help just organize the data and the stuff that's coming in and just be there to assist would be wonderful too. Was there a Bigfoot on your photos?
I'm going to say the same thing as Dawn. Also, if anybody's good at communication, because I am really bad at communicating and even staying in communication with people. So if somebody doesn't like actually talk to me, I fall into my own gravity well for years at a time. And so, like the Kid and Tail team could probably use somebody who's a better communicator and promoter than myself. I'm sure that, as Dawn said, we like to literally keep our heads down and weeds, so that could probably be said for anyone of us up here.
Also, each team is a little bit different. Obviously, the complexities, ours is trying to just discover where the plant is right now. So we're at a different stage. We don't necessarily need that kind of skill set. It's more just that love of trying to find what's out there and hoping that it will be there. And sometimes we're rewarded. So.
All right, any last questions for the panel?
Just a quick thought to add on to all the good suggestions you have for how people can get involved. I also think that as we're learning about how these species work, there's also literature reviews that can be done, as well as presentations can always use help putting presentations together. So those are two other ideas I have for non-field-based work. Andy, going back to you with the Bayflower, with that sand situation and a strong filter for transplants surviving, is your team thinking about just using seeds as a way to augment or introduce?
Answer is I don't know. Most of the planting out has been done by Gus. It was sort of his passion to get this group going, and he's really taken the strong lead on that. We're just not quite sure how things are going to play out because the soils are so sandy. He put in a new site last year that's right along one of the roads in Kankakee, which was the very first picture on my little slide deck there. So you can see how robust the plants are after Elisa grows them. They look beautiful and big. They go from seed to flower in about 3 months. They're very fast, unlike some of the other species that are just taking years. And they look beautiful one year. They're producing tons of flowers and lots of seeds, and then there's nothing the next year. So I think he was putting them out in places where he might be able to more readily water them occasionally if the year is very difficult, like it was in 2023. Some of the sites he was putting them in were a long ways away from the roads, so getting in with backpacks and water and things is more difficult. So we'll see on those areas where he has more chance to give them a chance the first year to really get established, and then maybe they will do better. But yeah, I agree that soil is very much a challenge. Answered your question or not, but thanks.
I'm going to cut it off there. If you do have any further questions during the break and the happy hour, we will have our species team leads stand at the signs that are around the room with their specific species on them. And if you have further questions or would just like to chat with them about that specific species, feel free to talk to the team leads then. We are going to take a break now, and during our break, the cash bar will be set up. We'll have a happy hour and networking until about 3:30. I will come back to the stage and try to get us to all reconvene at 3:30 so we can close up. I do want to add, if you are having an alcoholic beverage, please stay in this room. Don't go out in the hallway with it. So just keep that in mind as well. So we'll take a short break. The bar will be set up and you'll have more opportunity to talk to our species conservation team leads.